To receive those funds, we always like to see that there is a building structure in place. And that's what Tree City does, because in order to achieve Tree City, you have to have a tree board. We don't like to pass out money just at random. If we have communities with tree boards, then we know that there's someone who's actually looking out for the care and value of those trees. Getting into private property trees is always a hairy business. I did bring some photos along that I've used in the past, showing instances where we have trees that are on private property that threaten the public right-of-way. So it might fall or fail into the road, and those are the ones that you'd want to have the ability to take care of as a community. Insect infestations, I'm sorry you guys, you live in Western North Carolina. Everything lives and breathes here. I mean, it all ends up here. And you're also a great spot for people to come and visit as tourists, as people who relocate from homes and that kind of thing. And they're gonna bring them in, because they bring them in all the time. Gypsy moth is spread by people. Dutch elm disease was spread by people. And once it gets into an area, if you let it go, emerald ash borer is moving into the state by people. We move it on the wood. We move egg masses on logs and stuff like that. If you move it in and don't have a way to address it on private property, and that homeowner, I'm gonna pick on Illinois because that's where I'm from, you move from Illinois and I bring my stuff down that's got emerald ash borer on, I say, hey, we live with it in Illinois, it's not that big a deal to us. I look around this community and I think that insects that can kill trees in this area, I think that's a big deal. I think that's part of what Montreat, the community is. So, did you have any specific questions?
Do you have questions specifically for Eric?
Eric, section 8 that refers to the private property and so forth, is it necessary to have that in there to go for Tree City USA?
It is not necessary to have that portion in there to become a Tree City USA.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Eric? Thank you. We appreciate you coming tonight.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll close the public hearing and move on to comments. Tonight I've had 22 years of working with the staff in Montreat, and I want to say to the public and to the staff how much they do for us. They treat us like family. They leave their families to come clear our roads. They come in the middle of the night whenever we need anything, and they are above and beyond the best staff in this state. And I want to say thank you. We will move the minutes from the consent agenda, so we'll start with the first of 46 pages of minutes, the July 2nd agenda meeting minutes. Anything about those you want to?
Can I just ask that we wait until December to go over these minutes? I mean, they just came to us on Tuesday, many of them. And it would give us more time to look at them as a body. If there's an urgency to have them adopted, I would like a little more time to spend with them and just perhaps have them.
Can't hear you.
I would ask that we consider waiting until the December meeting to address the minute issues, since we're seeing some of them fairly recently. I would like to see them and spend a little more time with them if the rest of the council has no objections to it.
Comments or objections?
I have a question. Or theoretically, do we have a budget if we haven't adopted the minutes from the budget section?
We
You adopted the budget.
adopted the budget.
Okay, so we adopted the budget separately, but we haven't adopted the minutes from that budget.
But we-
Yes.
We adopted the budget.
You still adopted the budget.
But the minutes are still pending.
That's right. From July.
In July.
Oh, I'm sorry, June, you already adopted.
June, we've already
June.
adopted the budget.
Yeah,
It was
Okay.
June 26th.
that's right, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
the end of June for July
Yeah.
1st.
Yeah.
You're accurate.
But you still adopted the budget as a document itself, so it is still an adopted budget.
Okay, I just want to be sure.
So I don't really hear objection, we'll just move the adoption of minutes to the December meeting.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank Ron for his extra work getting all these minutes compiled without having a town clerk. I noticed you sent us this packet after midnight, And I know you have to do this kind of work at home at night because you've got your other work to do in the daytime. So thank you for the extra work. This represents a lot of work.
And thanks to Steve, I mean, it was a tag team effort, so.
And I do concur with that. I just would like to spend a little more time with it and also see the
Actual corrections that I know people have, I sent you a few and other people have sent you a few, and you can do that and include that in the December packet.
They were already included. Those changes that y'all have sent me have been made.
Okay.
Town administrators' comments, communications, Ron?
Thank you, Mayor. Let's see, we will hold the minutes then until December. You'll also have the October 1st, October 8th, October 15th, and then you'll have your November minutes by that time as well. Some quick updates, the Texas Road Bridge project, you have a note, a letter in front of you from Richard DuBose that I just received explaining that the right-of-way issue has been referred to their executive committee. And, you know, this is my own personal comment. This has no reflection from any board member comments, but I think while there are claims to be neutral in this matter, their intentional delays after several months indicate otherwise. And that's all I'll say about that. The sanitation services update, as I explained to y'all, will be held off until January. One important thing that I do want to talk to you about is the 2015 POW bill changes. That was sent in your packet. I hope you had a chance to read this because this does have an effect on future budgets. The new changes have done several things, and I'd like to quickly go over those. POW bill funds are now subject to state appropriations. The amount of POW bill funds allocated to municipalities used to be statutorily tied to our gas tax. So we received a percentage of gas tax. Now that they're tied to state appropriations, the municipalities will only receive POW bill funds appropriated by the General Assembly each year. So like other state revenues that we've seen in the past that have been either taken away or reduced dramatically, this looks like another step by the General Assembly to do that to your POW bill. Now, we receive roughly about $45,000, which is almost 2 cents on your tax rate. That's a big hit for us, and I'll explain here in a minute why. The second part is that the use of POW bill revenue and the new earmark language, it directs a municipality to use POW bill funds primarily for resurfacing of streets within the corporate limits. Now, what's important about that is we spend roughly about $45,000. We spend $25,000 on resurfacing streets. Those are just small streets. We normally have big projects, but that's on small street repairs. That will still continue, but that other $25,000 is spent on signage and drainage and things that aren't directly tied to resurfacing streets. So what that means is by this time next year, you will see your POW bill money being used for resurfacing. But that means no additional money, unless you allocate it as a board, will go to street sign purchase, to drainage projects, to some of that those other things that POW bill pays for now. So automatically, by this time next year, you'll be looking at least a penny on your tax rate of lower revenue. So just keep that in mind. And finally, we do not do this in Montreat. The state has basically given us authority under law already to levy a $5 vehicle tax. So while they're taking money on one hand, they've now said that towns can earmark up to $30. So that might be another way to do this. But I think what's important is this last sentence. Although not explicit in the changes made this year, it is possible that the legislature is signaling that in the future, municipalities will be expected to use local revenue to fund the majority of street construction improvements and repair projects. So again, something that we really need to keep in mind and how drastic changes in Raleigh can have or impact us here in Montreat. Do y'all have any questions about that?
have one. I talked with Mr. Stackhouse today about this very issue, and because I had read this thing about that the town could levy a $30 motor vehicle tax. And he explained to me that some of that could be a tax that's added to your tax bill on your car, for those of us who live here. But how that $30 per vehicle is shared with, for instance, students or people who work here or people who don't register their car in this county is another whole dilemma for how a municipality like this one is able to maintain its streets in the future with the legislative changes.
That's right, that's a great question. College students, folks that have seasonal housing, Black Mountain levies a $5 vehicle tax. That comes on your tax bill. So there may be some options there, but again, we never really looked at that because it wouldn't raise enough money for us to do it, really. But now it may be something that we seriously need to look at.
Anything else for Ron? Administrative reports, Chief? Stand in. Thanks, David.
Good evening. Sorry, Chief couldn't be here. Could stand in one more time. Be very brief. October really didn't hold any surprises for us. It was pretty much business as usual. The one big event we had basically started at the very beginning, on the 2nd. We had the inclement weather coming in. I say inclement weather, it was billed to be much larger than what it was, enough that the governor issued a state of emergency. In preparation for that, we did go ahead and activate our Code Red system. That's the first time that's been activated in about a year or so's time, a year and change. We did have a good amount of success with that. Looking at some preliminary numbers that came in about an hour after that was activated, we had a little over 81% success rate on that. That sounds a little bit low simply because some of those numbers nobody picked up, answering machines, that sort of thing there. So overall, pretty well. I also don't think that number brings into account people who have actually signed up for text alerts as well as emails. But we did have a lot of positive feedback on that. Thankfully, the weather did not get us as bad as what was possibly predicted. We had a few issues. We had a couple of trees come down, did close of 2 roads there on Virginia and West Virginia, ironically, for about 2 days till we had people come in and clear those out. Some minor power outages, not go too terribly long. That was okay. We did have limbs, leaves, a lot of crumbs and stuff come down, nothing major there. We did have a tree fall into a house on Oak Lane. We did notify the homeowners of that. Other than that, it was business as usual. There for about the 3.5, 4 weeks of peak leaf season, we did have a tremendous uptick in traffic. I cannot give you any figures on that, but every officer that worked any kind of duty will concur. And we did have a tremendous amount more, even going into the wee hours, going 2 a.m. sometimes. Yeah, they worked 6 leaves at 2 a.m. I guess I figured it'd beat the crowd. Other than that, as far as we are approaching the end of the year, as the department as a whole, every officer has completed all the mandatory state and departmental training, so we are good to go into the year 2016. No questions?
Any questions for David?
One. With all that uptick in traffic, what about the uptick in people trying to park at the trailheads? Has that worked out okay just with people where they can leave their cars, or do we have an issue there?
No more issue than what you would see during a good hiking season. You know, let's say a Saturday afternoon when it was in the 80s. I think a lot with the leaf season, you have just as much vehicular stuff as opposed to people just coming and parking and then getting out. But we did have the trailheads. The parking there sort of expands itself as they sort of trickle down the roads, but we didn't have anything where it was blocking access to emergency vehicles or anything like that. As far as I know, we didn't have any residents that had their driveways blocked or anything of that nature, so it was uneventful. We accommodated.
Good, thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Before we move on to Steve's report, I just would like to remind you all, if you didn't get a phone call or a text or an email, you probably are not signed up for Code Red. You can do that on the website. It's important for you to sign up so that you'll hear when there's bad weather coming or some important announcement from the town. Also, you can sign up for the sunshine list and get regular communications from the town. But the Code Red is very important, to know what's happening in town in an emergency situation.
Just to bring you up to date on that, the Code Red emergency, the funds that were used to implement that were used as part of the funds that the town received from the Montreat cottagers several years ago, and that's how they were chosen by the town to be used.
Steve, Public Works.
Thank you, Mary. We had our bulk pickup day, October the 27th, and we collected over 50 yards of bulk items during that period. The crews have completed the pothole patching on the streets and began clearing the streets of the leaves that are slick. We start on the upper, most steepest roads first, and then we work our way down on into town. And I urge the residents to bag their leaves. Please don't blow them into the ditches and culverts. We just don't have the means to get all that up. But if you'll bag them in the biodegradable bags, we will get those picked up. Moving on to the water. We had one water leak last month up on John Knox, and it ended up being a 3/4 service that was on the customer's side. So that's all I have.
Any questions for Steve tonight? Finance, Steve.
Thank you. You have your detailed reports for September, October, and the summary report for September 2015. In the general fund, year-to-date through September, revenues $151,000. That's almost double what it was same time last year. It just depends on when some unusual things come in. The expenditures for general fund, $360,000, that's a little less than the same time last year. So we always run a deficit this time of year because our big influx of money doesn't come in until taxes in mid-year. But $209,000 deficit opposed to $318 last year. In the water fund, revenues of $95,000, just a little bit above what it was same time last year. Expenses of $17,000, very close to last year. So we're looking so far with surplus for the year $77,000. Water fund's almost the opposite of the general fund. It tends to do its best towards the end of the summer. And your cash and investments report, this is as of the end of October 31st. Total assets in all accounts of $1,797,000. And for the year to date, we brought in $338 in interest in all accounts.
Any questions for Steve? Thanks, Steve. We had our building inspector report last week. You can find the charts and his detailed report in your packet online. Now's the time for public comment for items that were on the agenda or are on the agenda. If you'll limit your comments to 3 minutes and give your name and address, and they'll put on the screen a countdown for you. Okay. Under old business, we have the Montreat General Ordinance, Chapter K, Article 5, Trees and Tree City USA application. Motion before you.
Can you have some discussion before we make the motion, or do you need us to do the motion? You need the motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we adopt the proposed Montreat General Ordinance, Chapter K, Article 5, trees.
Second. Discussion?
I do have several things that I'd like some more information on before casting a vote, yea or nay. I do agree with Mr. Burns on several things. I do have questions, particularly with the stump removal and how that affects some of those things, so I'd like us perhaps to readdress that. And one of the things that immediately comes to my mind is that if this were strictly enforced, and if we didn't grandfather things in, that we'd have to remove that stump that's across from the post office for CC, Mr. Caldwell, and there was the, what did they used to call that, the spirit tree, or that was sort of the tree the preachers would come and stand under as they made, you know, sort of different calls and things. So I mean, I sort of see that that might not be necessary. I also have some concerns with respect to Section 8, and for me, in particularly, one of the things that bothers me is that it doesn't address the issue of, I think every piece of property in Montreat probably has an infected hemlock on it, a woolly adelgid sort of thing. So the way this is currently written, and I don't know how to modify it, so, but the way it's currently written, it would basically say that on my property, every hemlock, I would need to take out at my expense, or it could be interpreted that way. And that seems to be a pretty heavy hammer for it to be possibly interpreted that way. I certainly see the need for something in the future if we have elm boards. I don't know how much elm we have in Montreat, but if there is a new infestation of something coming in, so if there's some way to modify that statement, Section 8, number 1, that perhaps excluding the woolly adelgid, because that just doesn't work for us here in Montreat. It's already in existence. So.
844-230-1117.
I was listening to 1117. I have to agree with Commissioner Standard in that Section 8 concerns me very much, and that's the same things she has mentioned, the existing trees that many trees that we've got that are dead, the hemlocks and so forth. Stump removal becomes very, very expensive, so that concerns me also. But I never have liked people coming on my property telling me what I need to do with my trees. I'm one of those that takes care of my trees, and I'm sure there are people who do not, but I found that most people in Montreat do. They treated their trees for the woolly adelgid and so forth, and they've taken trees out. I've had the town come by and look at my property where there was a dead hickory tree right on the town right-of-way that endangered my house and endangered the public. And it was taken down. And I think most people in Montreat